Hi, welcome to Board Game Express. Today we're going to set up and play Princes of Florence. Now in Princes of Florence, players take the role of Italian aristocrats who are competing to build the best buildings, landscapes, all in order to attract professionals who are going to perform the best works and bring their clan the best reputations and prestige. Now, to set up Princes of Florence, first the game is going to go 7 turns, so put your round marker over there. The little figure here is for first player, so Bluey is randomly chosen first. And go ahead and set up everything according to the player chart on the right. One of the really nice things about Princes of Florence is that for a game that is as old as it is, they did a great job of putting all the necessary information on each player's board so that there are a lot of little details you're not going to have to remember. So something that will help you during the setup is you want to put all of the items that are handled in the auction phase in one area, and then all of the items for the action phase in the other area. So I put everything in the auction down here. All the action things are over here. Now, players are going to start at 0 prestige points, and also everyone is going to get 3,500 florin, or money. And the only thing necessary in the setup is, depending on player count, you're going to want to remove a couple of these, what are called freedoms. You use them all in a 5-player game. For each player missing, you're going to want to remove 1 of each. So for a 3-player game, you're going to take out 2 of each of these things. There should be 1 less than the number of players. Alright, now that we are set up, let's talk about how the game is going to flow. So the game goes 7 rounds. And in each round, there are 2 parts. There's an auction part and an action part. So you start off with the auction part, and there are 7 items for auction. They are going to be listed on your board right here. These 3 are what are called landscapes, so a forest, lake, and a park. And then you're going to have prestige cards, a deck of prestige cards, some recruiting cards, jesters, and builders. Now, the way the auction works is whoever's first player is going to nominate one of these 7 items. So let's say, fix that. And Princes of Florence does something a little unusual. You don't have a choice in the amount of your bid. The first bid must be exactly 200. And every player clockwise after that either has to raise by exactly 100 or pass and be out. There's no jump bidding. You cannot choose. It's just 200 minimum. Go up by 100 each time. So 200, maybe the Mr. Green wants to bid 3, 4, etc., etc. Now, once everyone else has passed, whoever wins it goes and buys it and takes it. Now, the reason you have these little markers is that once a person has won an item, you should leave. So let's say Green wins the prestige card. You should leave it there because each player can only win 1 thing during the auction, and each item can only be won 1 time. So if Green wins the prestige card, Green is out for all future, and prestige cards are out for the rest of the round as well, and so on and so forth. If Blue wins, then the next player will choose. If Blue does not win, then you will choose again. So maybe once a forest, now Blue and Red would bid off against each other, someone would win, and then the final player will simply get their pick of whatever is remaining for the 200 florins. Now, once the auction round is over, go ahead and take your pieces back. Take whatever object you won, and if it's a landscape, go ahead and put it on your board Tetris style. Some common sense rules here. You cannot overbuild your board. You cannot block something that's already on there, etc., etc. Now, the next thing that happens is the action phase. And in turn order, each player is going to get 2 actions per round. And the list of things that you can do is printed in the middle right. Something that's a little hard to read about this chart is the number on the left of each action, the 1 or the 1-2. That's a reference to how many times you may do that action in a round. It's a little unintuitive. I find when I teach this game, a lot of players interpret that as 1 action lets you do 2 of that thing. That's not what it means. It means, essentially, it means that the profession card and the freedom are actions that you can only do once. That's really all it should mean. You can do all the other things 1 or 2 times with your 2 actions, but those 2 limit 1 time per round. That's all it means. So you take any 2 actions you want. You can buy any one of the 3 freedoms. You can buy another profession card and or a building. Now, I did forget to mention as to the profession cards, when you are starting, you will shuffle this deck. You will give 4 to each player. They will choose to keep 3 of those cards, and the ones that everyone does not want is going to get shuffled back with the remainder of the deck, and that forms the draw pile. So everyone's going to start with 3,500 as well as 3 of these profession cards. And let's talk specifically about some of these actions. Now, all of the decks in the game, the profession, the bonus, and the prestige, when you get one of these, the process is that you will take the top 5 cards from the deck. You get to keep one of your choice, and then you will put the other 4 back on the bottom of the deck in any order you want. So in theory, if there's a card that you want to see, again, if you manage to go through the deck, you would want that on top, whereas a card you would not want, you would want that on bottom. But I find that to be a pretty minor thing to consider. Basically, draw 5 cards, keep the one you want. That's true for professions, that's true for prestige, that's true for bonus cards. It's not relevant for recruiting cards because they're all identical, and there's only 5 anyway. Alright, so that is profession card. There's no limit to how many you can have. You draw 5, keep 1. If you buy a bonus card, same thing. Draw 5, keep 1. If you buy a freedom, you put it on the appropriate space in your board. You can only buy 1 freedom with your actions during the turn. If you buy a freedom, you have to do something else. The cost of each of these things is printed on the right. So a card is going to cost 300 florin, a freedom 300 as well. Now, buildings, a little bit more involved here. When you build a building, you choose one and you put it on your board. You may not have 2 of the same building. If you buy a laboratory, that's the only laboratory you're allowed to have. And when you build a building, a couple things happen. First, you're going to gain 3 prestige points. That is printed here. It is a little tricky to remember. Sometimes newer players kind of forget. Every time you buy a building, go ahead and give yourself 3 points right there. The buildings cost 700, and when you place them, a couple of rules restrictions here. Buildings are not allowed to share an edge with an existing building, and that includes your opening little 2x3 palazzo over here. They are allowed to touch corner to corner. So for example, I would not be allowed to do that, but I am allowed to do that. They can corner corner. This rule only applies building to building. If you have landscapes, landscapes can touch whatever you want. So you could build a lake over here, you could build a lake over here, your second building can be over here, that is all fine. You would not be allowed to do this because now you're touching edge to edge. So when you're buying buildings, there is a bit of consideration as to how you want to Tetris this thing. I will say that for the most part, most strategies, you will have enough room unless you kind of go a little overboard with the buildings. Alright. Now the final action, so building, freedom, bonus card, profession card, the final one is what the game calls a work. Now what a work is playing a profession card. Now, all of the profession cards are actually labeled and indexed on the left side of your player board. The number 1 through 21 doesn't actually have any game relevance. It's basically an index number, so you can find the card a little more quickly. Now, what is going to be indicated on each card is that profession's desired building, freedom, and landscape. So, how each card scores is going to depend on whether you have the necessary item to make that profession happy. Now, when you score a profession card, my friends and I find it easiest kind of to go from the bottom up because it's actually sort of the base score for your position. And the first thing is bonus cards. Now, these are the bonus cards that you can purchase. You can have as many as you want. You can also add as many as you want each time you play a work. Bonus cards, you basically have to read the text, and it will generally say things like you increase the value of the profession you play based on how many of this object and this object you have. So it may reference how many landscapes you have, or it may reference how many freedoms you have, or how many jesters or builders you've previously purchased. Now after that is your base value is going to be 1 point per profession that you own. And it is noted on the card, but recruiting cards also count as professions. 1 point per profession card that you own or have already played. Then you will get 2 additional points per jester that you have acquired. And then at that point you're going to add 3, 3, and 4 if you have the matching freedom, landscape, and building. And note that while the per card and per jester point values are per that you own, the building, landscape, and freedom are actually just one and done. You either have it or you don't. You do not score multiples just because you may have 2 forests or 2 parks, for example. Alright, so that's basically the way a work works. Alright, so that is the game flow. Everyone auctions, wins 1 thing, and then everyone in turn order takes 2 actions. Now let's talk about the specifics of what these things do, what these pieces are. The landscapes are basically things that are needed for certain professions. The jesters are just universally boost your professions by 2 points each. The builders are kind of interesting. Your first builder is going to reduce the cost of buying a building from 700 to 300. And yes, I know it's got a 300 minus and it makes it look like it's a $300 discount. It actually means subtract 300 florin from your bank, so it's pay 300. Now the second builder that you pick up is going to give you 3 points. So the second and third, in fact, will give you 3. Also, it will allow you, once you have 2, to build adjacently. So basically the rule that says you were not allowed to build adjacent, once you have 2, now you can build your buildings adjacent to each other. And once you have this, you can basically put a lot of buildings in your palazzo if you want to. The third is very nice. The third builder, in addition to giving you another 3, is going to reduce the cost of all your buildings to free. Now, it doesn't cost any money, but you do still pay the action. It's not like once you have 3 builders, you can just go slap, 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 slap. No, it's just don't pay anything when you take another building. Now, the prestige cards, so remember, draw 5, keep 1. These are endgame victory point cards. They will basically indicate a condition of some sort. So perhaps they'll say, have the most landscapes, or have the fewest empty spaces, or have the most completed works, or whatever. These cards have, a lot of them will have 2 parts to it. Let me find an example. So this one says for having the most works. The number in the sort of the primary area is what you score if you end up in the lead by yourself at the end of the game. However, if you are tied for the most works, that is what the number in parentheses is for. So it's basically sole lead and then kind of half value if you are tied for the lead. You just hang on to these till the end of the game and score up then. Now, recruiting cards. These are very useful. What a recruiting card does is, when you pick one up in the auction, you may use it immediately, or you can save it until one of your future turns and use it then. What it does is, after a person has played a profession, once they've played a work and scored it, they are going to put it out in front of their board. And the reason they lay it there is because, 1, it keeps count of how many professions you have, so that that's part of your score when you play professions. Second, you can use a recruiter card to pick up a profession that an opponent, not yourself, an opponent has previously played. So if red previously scored this guy, and you buy a recruiting card, you can swap it out and take this into your hand. You will leave the recruiting card on the other player's board. This is not something they can use. It's already been used. It merely helps them to keep count of how many professions they own officially, because you're not stealing it. You're just sort of hiring him. He still has his previous work completed. And then if you were to do this during your turn, you can do it immediately and immediately play that work yourself and score it. So a recruiting card is basically, hey, I like your profession, I have a lot of the same landscapes or freedoms or buildings, I want to play that guy, and now you get to score it. Alright, so that's what all of the auction items do. Oh, just a real quick mention. If you ever build a duplicate of the exact same landscape, so if you build a second park or anything else, you'll get 3 prestige points as well for that. So that's labeled here as well. Alright, so now let's talk about some of the items for the actions. The buildings, relatively straightforward. You pay for them, put them down, and they'll score 3 points, and they will help you score higher on your professions. The freedoms, that is basically all they do. They are referenced in your whatever profession card you have. So if you have it, it'll boost it. If you don't, you don't. Bonus cards, you can have any number of these, and they can be played at any time to enhance what's called the work value of one of the profession cards. And finally, let's talk about how to score these. Now, I already gave the general layout of how to calculate. You basically just go up and down the chart and add up all the numbers, and what that generates is what's called a work value. So if you have the freedom, if you have the landscape, if you have the building, how many jesters you have, how many total professions, etc., add it all up. Now, once you've calculated that number, so I'm just going to use as an example. Let's say I play a profession and I score 17. So a couple things to look out for. First, depending on what round it is, you're going to see a number underneath the round counter. It starts at 7, goes up to 17. That is what's called the minimum work value. In round 1, you are only allowed to play a work and score it if you meet the value of 7 or higher. And all the way up until on the very final turn of the game, you have to play only things that score 17 or better. Now, 7 is generally a pretty easy metric to hit. I do want to warn people that if you do not plan well, 17 on the final turn can actually be very tricky to hit depending on what you've done during the game. So let's just pretend I score 17. Well, that work value number 17, that is a reference to how much money you make. So 17 work value means you get 1,700 cash. Now, when you score that, you can immediately use some of that cash to purchase prestige points. So it costs 200, so it's listed on your chart here. It costs 200 to buy each point, and basically if I were to score 17, I kind of have to take 100 because of rounding as money, and then with the rest of my 1,600, I can buy either from 0 or I can buy up to 8 victory points if I wanted to. So 1,600 for 8 points, or any combination in between. Now, if you were to do the works action twice in a turn, which isn't unusual, so let's say I score 17 and 17, you are not supposed to add them together. They're separate. So I basically would have to take 100 for the first work that I performed, 100 for the second work, and then I could potentially buy 8 points for each, a total of 16 prestige points if I wanted to. All right. Now, when you produce a work, that's what this is for again, you will want to place it at whatever you scored to keep track of what's called the best work of the turn. So let's say I score 13, right? You lay it on the 13. Now, this is a bonus that's given to whoever produced the single best work of the turn. If you did 2 works, you don't add them together. You simply score whatever your higher one is. You simply mark whichever one your higher one is. And what happens is after everyone has taken their turn, whoever has the highest gets a best work of the round bonus of 3 prestige points. If there's a tie for the best work, then it's friendly ties. Everybody gets it. All right. Now, once you score that 3-point bonus, next turn begins. Take back all your markers. You'll do another auction. You'll do another set of everybody does 2 actions, so on and so forth, until the very end. After you finish 7 turns, go ahead and reveal your prestige cards, score those out, and then once you're done, you will have a winner and a best Italian patron family of the game. Now you know how to play Princes of Florence.